Welcome back to Bonchon Warrior, where we live wonderfully and bring our best. This is Ian Schneider, your host, and today, let's resume our previously interrupted programming.
Building together. I love that. Try to give them a little bit of a voice. What about number two?
Number two, I think often schools try to keep native teachers in a bubble, and they do that because they think they should, and it's helpful, and they don't want to burden you. But it's like the worst thing because it's just so beneficial. The more you learn about your students and like their daily school life and their daily culture and the way your school works and the community your school is in, the more you know how to make communicative teaching work in your school. I really think it's helpful to just be a bit proactive about just walk around and chat to your students and observe what goes on in the school and try to learn about the school's culture. And the more you do that, the more you'll know. And it's like classroom management. It's not a matter of being a perfectionist about it. Like I wouldn't say I'm good at this. Just it's the more you do that, the more helpful it is. And the more you can convince your Korean co-teachers to let you out of the bubble, and then they might actually consult you on things or talk to you more about how to do assessment and stuff, and then you can just contribute more and be more part of the school.
Yeah, I really like how you talk about one way you sort of bust out of this bubble is by interacting more with your students so that you can get more of a feel of their daily life, so that you can figure out how to make a more communicative classroom around how they actually like to communicate with each other and their interests. How have you approached bursting through the bubble with co-teachers? Because I can just listen to some people saying now, my co-teacher won't talk to me, or it's very, very tough to get her to listen to anything I want to say.
I think this is really tough. Often the habit is to do that teacher-to-teacher talk during class, and in my opinion, that just doesn't work. It's stressful, it's chaotic. You can never... That's like that kind of back of shop talk in front of students is never productive. So I think you have to find ways to make time to meet your co-teachers, and this is still a challenge for me because sometimes it's a matter of like you go and hover next to their desk and say, do you have a couple of minutes to chat? And often everyone's trying to get the meeting be very polite and finish the conversation as quickly as possible, which isn't helpful. But I think you just have to try finding ways to talk to them and open new connections again and again. And it might be different with each co-teacher. And I think starting off, some of my co-teachers have been really observant about how things are happening in class or particular students in ways that I didn't realize that they were. So I think don't have assumptions about your co-teacher. Even if they seem not to be super helpful in class, they might still have a lot really valuable point of view. So just going to them open-mindedly and trying to find ways to make the time and space to talk.
Is there an example of something you remember when you approached your co-teacher with something and it led to sort of breaking through that bubble and having more collaboration or some kind of positive exchange?
So just recently, normally native teachers teach once per week, spread out through the year.
Yeah.
And a lot of those lessons are cancelled for school events and stuff. And so that can be
the Ogre is active today.
A little frustrating. It's rush hour in Yeongnam. That can be frustrating when everything's spread out in time and students aren't like they have too much of a gap between seeing you. Anyway, that's been a frustration for me. And
in the weekly 1 hour sessions, you find that there's too much of a gap and not enough time to really get to the meat of what you want to do.
Well, I feel like I'm fighting against this. This is a depressing thing to talk about. We're all fighting against the whole system because they meet us, but then at least in secondary schools, generally they're doing grammar translation learning the rest of the time. So that's where you feel like you're fighting against the system. And like you can do communicative stuff in your lesson and then they go to a week that's very much not communicative and then come back to you again. Yeah, that can be frustrating. So this year high schools are introducing elective English in 2nd grade, 11th grade, as I mentioned. and I wanted to teach in blocks of time. And that's just generally not done. And I really thought that the Korean teachers would just shut me down immediately. But I made a kind of little diagram showing how it would work in the semester. And in a very friendly way, I kind of assertively said to them, I want to come to the planning meeting for the year, and I want to like make my case for doing it this way. So I did, and they could understand the way I had presented on the paper. And when I brought up all these problems that I have, not problems, I have all these concerns, and I think things could be done differently, they actually agreed, and they could see my point of view.
Yeah.
And so it was great. They took what I was saying seriously, and then we discussed it, and they did want to change it a little bit because their worry was that if students are out of Korean teachers class at particular times, they might be upset. So this is getting into stuff you will not understand until you've been in Korean public school for a while. But instead of doing the order A, B, C, they made the order of meeting me A, C, V, because C class are less motivated about the tests anyway. So if they're seeing me at the kind of risky time, then that's a little less likely there will be complaints. So they made like this one tweak to my plan, and then they were cool with the plan.
Wow.
So just this is the thing about the bubble. They will assume it's this huge burden to you to involve you in any kind of planning meeting, and it's in Korean. Like, I wasn't asking them to not do the meeting in Korean. I just wanted to be able to be there and do my part in English.
This is a planning meeting among the other English teachers in your school. Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So in February, I'm not sure about elementary schools, but I think in secondary schools, generally in February, there are some planning days where the school year gets planned out.
Yeah.
And now this year, coronavirus has blown all of that out of the water, but generally that's how it works. So if you can be there for that, that can be helpful. But also just like if they have a meeting during the year, just let them know that you're interested in being there. You're never going to get them to do the meeting in English, and it would be really arrogant to try to do that. But
for sure.
But just being there can be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the gist of what I'm sort of getting from this is when you approach your co-teacher, it's not just about talking about problems. You're also coming forth with solutions, and you're trying to make the solutions very clear and easy to understand by diagramming it and giving an example. And when you come forward with the solution, you've done the legwork. It's a lot easier for them to perhaps acquiesce if at least you can make some good sense.
And maybe communicating things in a couple of different ways, like having something on paper, but also talking about it. And it's like with students, you can figure out whether someone's understanding you, and whether they understand you is not always a matter of their English level. My co-teacher's English level, all of them have fantastic English, but it's about the way Korean schools work, and the assumptions about how things work are very different. So that's another reason why the more you can learn about how your school works, the more likely the plan you're going to them with will make sense.
Sure. I mean, you could sit and complain about your system, or you could learn how to maneuver through your system and try to get what you want.
Yeah. And that leads into my third tip for new teachers. And it's definitely a tip for me when I started, and that's to approach the whole thing with some humility. I think there are a bunch of really well-qualified non-native English speaker teachers who would love to have our jobs. For example, from the Philippines, from other countries throughout Asia. And our students, I think, they don't really need native English, they need global English. So the whole native speakerist framing of our program, I think, has some issues, and there's a lot of a sense of like, you're here to have an adventure in Korea for a year, which I think that's great, have an adventure in Korea, but at school you're there to do a job. And I think definitely when I was first starting, I didn't have enough humility about all the things I mentioned, like learning about how the school works and learning about the way the students and their kind of community with the Korean teachers works. And like I support communicative language teaching, and I want the Korean English education system to move towards more communicative stuff. But I think there's a real risk of being almost kind of neo-colonialist about that.
That's a big word. So by that, you're kind of saying that
Well,
you're
so-
impressing the values that you believe to be like a superior form of language teaching onto a culture that might not embrace that, and you might not necessarily understand why they do this other thing. So it sounds like you're saying to just impress it upon them without at first doing your own homework, investigating why they do the things that they do now.
For example, a lot of communicative language teaching is about small group work where everyone in the group is an equal, and almost like a kind of like corporate business meeting kind of culture. And it really centers a way of doing dialogue that's not universal. It's like communicative teaching often is very centered on the way monolingual, native English-speaking white people speak. And that's a problem. Communicative in the sense of doing authentic language practice so that you're ready to use English in real life. That is great, and we need to be moving towards that. But I think we have to be wary of this kind of narrative of like, I am the native teacher here as a hero to impart communicative teaching. And I think that was an issue for me when I was first starting, and I'm worried I'm sounding really arrogant right now because like my Korean language is non-existent and I have a lot more learning to do. But getting past that kind of thinking and finding ways to get like the real language use sense of communicative to work in the Korean school culture has been so productive, and so much more productive than being really insistent on like, no, I did a CELTA and I learned how to do this like this particular kind of information gap task and it will work. That was a problem, I think.
Let's take a break. We can resume this topic in another time. But for now, I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. And this is Ian from Banchan Warrior, reminding you to live wonderfully and always bring your best.